Well, guys, I finally saw it. I saw Superman. So, just like the movie, which has a hero that needs no introduction, we'll get right into the action. Something I really appreciate about this movie is how it drops you right into the action, just like a Silver Age comic book. There's already deep lore going on with Green Lantern and the Justice Gang. Mankind has already known about metahumans for about 300 years. Superman and Lex Luthor have been at it for 3 years already. Something I really want to talk about is James Gunn versus Zack Snyder and their takes on this character. Zack Snyder went kind of in a direction where he treated Superman as Jesus from another planet. And that's not really something I appreciated. I don't think he got that right. I don't think there is a way to get that right. And despite my old opinion in a video I did about 2 years ago, I don't think that's the correct take on Superman. Now, James Gunn went more in a traditional direction that's more consistent with the way Superman was always written, which is to be compared to Moses, and like Moses being an exile from a different people and adopted and raised by not the people he was born from, and to take on the values of those people, at least to an extent, and become a leader of the oppressed, you could say, just an example to everybody. I think that's more consistent with who Superman is, and that's the direction James Gunn took it. Now, if you think Zack Snyder's version of Superman is the peak version and is the perfect version, visually and metaphorically, then you probably won't like this version. Now, I don't really fall into this camp. I love the return to the Richard Donner of sort of visual aesthetic to Superman. Also, the visual aesthetic of this movie looks a lot like the animated series of Superman, which I did grow up watching, and this is the closest live action thing I have seen to that same aesthetic. And dare I say it, that made the world better and gave it more depth. I think it was good to have a Superman that's less of a grimdark Superman, like something you would see in 40K. It's really more of the optimistic Superman that is more true to the comic books. And because of that, there's more room for character growth. So this Superman does have more depth. Corn Sweat Superman is very layered. He grows a lot as a character as this movie progresses. A lot of the internal struggle that Superman goes through in the story has to do with being an adopted child. There was a lot of stuff on the internet on both sides of the political spectrum around Superman being sort of an immigrant. There's not too much of that in the movie, and I don't want to get into too much of that, but I think we're so divided after the 10 years of content that's been coming out of Hollywood that we don't even know how to objectively judge art anymore. This is really just a fun story that's it's good for everyone, no matter where you're coming from. It's just a relatable human story about a guy who's adopted and in adopted culture with adopted parents, and he's trying to understand who his biological parents in native culture are. And on that note, Superman is very optimistic when he has a lot of reason to be distrusting, when he could be very pessimistic and cynical, but he chooses to be an optimist. And this is a great contrast to Lois Lane, who is very much a big city news reporter. And he talks about his faith in people and how his optimism and being sort of a Boy Scout is the real punk rock. And I think that is a great message, and that's really the main takeaway from the movie. And on that note, this movie feels like a milestone in a cultural shift that I felt going on for some time, and I think we all have felt recently. That we've been going through a long period of cultural nihilism, the younger generation lacking a sense of direction, and not only visually, but in the message, this movie is a return to form to the Richard Donner version, which came out in the 70s, which was from a sort of cynical period of filmmaking, cynical time in the culture, calling back to a more optimistic time in the culture. And in the same way, this movie is a milestone in noting that we're going back to something old by starting something new. We're in an optimistic time where we're going to stand tall for our values. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the real punk rock. Think I got good takes on stories? Wait till you see how I write a story. Check out Call Sign Orion on Fund My Comic.